Hello, Crystalvein24. This video is meant to be a continuation of the debate that we had suspended a month ago because of reasons of my computer not working about evolution. So, sorry that I have not responded to you in a month, but you know why. So I want to get through this video as quickly as possible because I had everything that I wanted to say in my head and it sounded really long, so I don't want many distractions from this. Okay, so regarding the fossil record, you said that there are still too many gaps in the fossil record in order to believe that evolution is true. And I tried to make the point that I'm going to make right now in my last video on this topic, but I don't think it came across, is that the gaps in the fossil record can only be evidence against evolution if you would expect the record to not contain any gaps, or to not contain as many gaps if evolution were true, and that's simply not the case. It's an unrealistic expectation, because in order for it to be met, you would have to have an entire collection of a complete record of all the fossils that, not all the fossils, but a complete record of a fossil of every single species that ever existed on the Earth, and that's simply too much to ask for. And unless you have all of that, you're not going to have a fossil record without gaps. So if evolution is true, you would still not expect there to not be as many gaps in the fossil record as there are. As I've tried to point out in previous videos, evolution doesn't ride on the fossil record really any more than, I guess, the plot of Harry Potter, such as it is, rides on the illustrations before each chapter. There's still plenty of other evidence that has been both observed as well as lost my train of thought, as well as carbon dating evidence, as well as genetic similarities between species that have not shown to be recently related in any way, and things of that nature, things that I've already discussed in previous videos. So yeah, that's the whole thing with the theory of, with the gaps in the fossil record. But there is another thing that you said in your last video to me that really caught my ear, and that was you were responding to how I said that speciation has been observed. For example, when you have one species of frog becoming another species of frog, you said something very telling, and that was that when one species of frog evolves into another, that's still one kind of frog becoming another kind of frog. Now, the statement that you made about that has some severe, I guess, repercussions, and I want you to understand those. Basically, you're coming at this from the angle that every type of animal has a sort of model in nature of what that animal should be, and that every individual of that species is simply a slight deviation from the model. That would have to be true in order for what you're saying about one frog becoming another type of frog to actually make any sense in this argument, and there is, at least to the best of my knowledge, no science that suggests that that's actually the case. So I want you to be aware of that. And I also want you to be aware of one other thing, which is that according to the theory of evolution, the changes from one species to another are extremely gradual, and there's a lot of gray area. There's no hard and fast line you can draw when two organisms are so dissimilar that they become a different species. You have to play it by your instinct, basically. Essentially, when an animal gives birth to an offspring, if that offspring is a mutant, it's still going to be almost indistinguishable from its parent. And then when that offspring has offspring, that's going to be indistinguishable from its parent, and so on and so forth. And the tiny changes accumulate gradually over time, and eventually, over long periods of time, you have the offspring of whatever 100th generation or whatever the species happens to be is so dissimilar to the original one that you started with that that's called speciation. So the whole concept of species is really one that humans use to categorize life into different manageable groups. It's not one that exists in nature, so you have to be very well aware of that as well. But how do we know that one species can turn into another? Well, that's by our very definition of species. Basically, if two animals cannot produce fertile offspring, then they're a different species. And of course, this definition of species has to be different for things like plants and bacteria, and things that reproduce asexually or what have you. But for animals, that is a sufficient definition that is accepted among the scientific community. And so we can definitely prove that one species of frog has turned into another species of frog. But at the same time, it's very important to realize that the word frog is simply our category, our human way of saying that this is what this type of animal is. The definition of frog is not one that exists in nature, as I've said before. But how do we know that, for example, a elephant can produce offspring that will eventually produce more offspring, and eventually the line will end in a whale? Because you like to mention the deficiency in the fossil record. Well, I like to mention those particular fossils that we have that lend themselves exactly to that particular kind of thing. We have plenty of intermediates, disregarding the gaps that exist in the fossil record. We do have plenty of fossils that serve as beautiful intermediates between either existing species or at least between confirmed species. For example, we have Australopithecus as well as a plethora of other humanoid fossils to serve as intermediates between the apes and the humans. We have Tiktaalik, the Tiktaalik species, which is actually still alive today, to serve as a beautiful intermediate between fish and land-dwelling quadrupeds. We have all kinds of species, and similar to that in every branch of the animal kingdom and all other kingdoms as well. Well, not all other kingdoms, but all other kingdoms in which we find fossils, like animals, plants, and stuff like that. So you should be well aware of that as well. And we know that that's an intermediate between confirmed species, not simply because of the similarity of the bones, but also because of many different other similarities, like the organs, the fact that it happens to be from the right period of time, and the exact geographic location, and it happens to have all the right mutations as you would expect if evolution were true. So that's how we know that. Now, I would like to close this video with one last example, and that is the Archaeopteryx, which is widely considered to be an intermediate between birds and dinosaurs, or dinosaurs and birds. And I specifically mentioned the Archaeopteryx because in the first video of this debate, the one that I responded to, you mentioned that the Archaeopteryx is considered by scientists to be a bird and not a dinosaur. This is a moot point because, like I said, the distinction between birds and dinosaurs is not one that exists in nature. It's one that humans have imposed, and it does have its uses in studying the animal kingdom, but ultimately it's not one that has any real significance. That is to, and not all scientists agree that Archaeopteryx is a bird and not a dinosaur. If you ask a different taxonomist, different taxonomists have different views on the matter, and it's not official by any means. But simply because some taxonomists consider the Archaeopteryx to be a bird and not a dinosaur does not mean that even that birds did not evolve from dinosaurs and that Archaeopteryx doesn't serve as a good intermediate. As a matter of fact, with any intermediate that exists, it has to belong in one of the two groups between which it is an intermediate. Australopithecus, for example, some consider it an ape, some consider it a human. Right now there is an official consideration for what it was, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But the point is that just because it's an in-between species doesn't mean that it's exempt from human rules of taxonomy, such as they are, which state that we have to place it in either one category or the other. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on that. So to recap, What did I say in this video? The concept of species is a human one, not one that really is defined by nature. So speciation does occur, and we have observed it. The examples of speciation from one species to a very markedly different species can still be seen in fossils, in not only the structure of the fossil, but in the context of which the fossil is found. And yeah, so again, thank you for waiting a month for this video, and I hope to hear back from you. Oh, I made a new catchphrase to say at the end of my videos. Life is like a dick. When it gets hard, fuck it. Alright, peace out.